Hi everyone, hope you're well. Chris Cowlin here. Now, before we get into it, I'd just like to inform you about a new website selling quality current and retro Spurs jerseys. okjersey.com. They sell all current and retro Tottenham Hotspur shirts in all sizes. They sell the current fan and player versions, as well as the 80s and 90s retro shirts, including my very favourite, the 1991 FA Cup final shirt. You can order very easily from okjersey.com, and if you use the code Chris, you will receive an 8% discount off your final order. You can also use the QR code on the top left of your screen. And by the way, they also have some training wear here and the 25-26 colour special edition jersey. Hello and welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another edition of Premier League Predictions. My name is Chris Cowlin and we are live on YouTube, X and Facebook. This evening I'll be joined by Gareth McGuinness and we will be looking ahead to this weekend's fixtures in the Premier League. 7 games will take place on Saturday, 2 on Sunday and 1 on Monday. Now please do get involved, put your score predictions in the comment section below. Now Arsenal are currently top of the table. They are 5 points clear at the top. In the top 4, Manchester City, Aston Villa and Chelsea. Now, our beloved club, Tottenham Hotspur, are currently mid-table in 11th spot with 19 points. 5 points from the top 4 and 5 points above 17th place, which, of course, is where Spurs finished last season. Now, Thomas Frank faces his old club, Brentford. They visit the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on Saturday. They have a terrible away record. And, of course, Spurs have a terrible home record. But we will get into it. Now, West Ham, Burnley and Wolves are all in the bottom 3. Gareth, how are you? Good evening. Are you looking forward to Premier League action this weekend?
Well, I always look forward to the weekend, Chris. It's I don't be at work. I've got my own football on a Saturday morning, so I usually be looking forward to a weekend regardless of how Spurs are playing or what form. And look, we know with football that anything can happen, so sometimes form can go out the window in games. Look, it's not been a great season so far for Spurs, but we've still got over half the season left. So there is time for it to change. We spoke about it a lot this season with Thomas Frank, and of course last week we spoke about, it was a big period of games and we were thinking that it probably ends with Brentford and Slavia Prague, and then there's going to be a better assessment of where we're at, because we've probably had some favourable fixtures since the PSG game. You look at Fulham, Newcastle away is tough, but you think about Brentford on Saturday and Slavia Prague at home on Tuesday. We need to be getting results in those games and winning those games. So I think we'll know more by this time next week. But look, always look forward to coming on the show and previewing the weekend, because there's so much, as always, to talk about.
Absolutely. Let's get straight into it, Gareth. We're going to start with the early kickoff on Saturday. Aston Villa take on Arsenal. Now, the Premier League table could be blown up or blown wide apart, really, because when you look at the table, Aston Villa are in 3rd spot at the moment. They have 27 points from 14 games. Arsenal are top, as I said, 33 points from 14 games. I tell you what, if Aston Villa won this game Saturday lunchtime, they'd be on 30 points. They'd be only 3 points away from Arsenal. Does this mean that Aston Villa could challenge for the Premier League title? Are they title contenders? Because I feel like they have gone under the radar a little bit. They've only lost 3 out of the 14 games played. They've won 8. They're doing well.
Yeah, and it's been a complete turnaround for Villa. I mean, I think they were in around the bottom 3 after those first 4 or 5 games. I mean, they didn't score a goal, I believe, until their 5th game. And there was a lot of talk about Emery, would it be a season too far? With his cycles, they tend to last about 3 years. But, I mean, they've absolutely got back to where they were last year and previous seasons, and they look a real threat. They're not for a team that couldn't score goals. They've gone and scored 4 away at Brighton in midweek. So this is possibly the worst time for Arsenal to get Aston Villa, and possibly the best time for Villa to catch Arsenal, because they are having some injury problems. We know Saliba and Gabriel are injured. Mosquera went down injured. In the Brentford game, Declan Rice went off. We're not sure if he'll be fit for this game. So it could be potentially facing an Arsenal team missing some of their best players. And Villa Park's always a difficult place to go. And Villa will look at this as an opportunity. I don't know if they're looking at the title, but I think they'll definitely look at this as a chance to strengthen their grip on that top 4 spot. Because they missed out last year, didn't they? They're in the Europa League this season. So they'll be looking to get back into the Champions League. So huge game. And Chris, as you says, rightly so, blowing the table wide open. But I think the other way, as there are about 4 points between 4th place and 14th in the
Well,
league. So
I
it
was
really
going to.
could be a top derby weekend in terms of results.
I was going to say, Gareth, look how the league table would look, because Arsenal would be top of 33. If Man City won their game, they'd have 31 points. If Villa won their game, they'd have 30 points. So you're talking 33, 31, 30. Now, a couple of weeks ago, every Arsenal fan was saying, they've won the league. So, nothing's over, is it? It's all to play for. But if teams like Man City, even Aston Villa, I know Chelsea have now lost their 4th game in the Premier League out of 14. They're sitting 4th with 24 points. You've got Crystal Palace, Sunderland. It's about consistency now, isn't it?
Well, that's it. And I still think Arsenal obviously have to prove they can get over the line. And if it is a very tight league towards the end of the season, that'll put more pressure on them because they are the favourites. Everybody is saying, well, it's now or never, really, for Mikel Arteta.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that experience, and maybe your only experience in it is disappointment. If you look back at the Champions League last year with PSG, the seasons they've ran Man City very close but not got over the line. I think they've been beaten a couple of semi-finals in the Carabao Cup as well. So when it comes to the nitty-gritty, Arsenal have found a way not to get over the line. So that question mark will always be there until you answer it. And I do think as well, Chris, if you look at the league at the minute, the teams around Arsenal, like 2nd, 3rd, 4th, Arsenal haven't beat any of them this year. That's not to say that Arsenal are a good team, but they drew at Stamford Bridge. They drew at home to Man City. They lost at Liverpool, who've been struggling. I think they're possibly some of their best results might be United and Spurs. But now Aston Villa are another team sitting 3rd. Can they go and beat that sort of highest ranked team in the league? Because they failed to do it against Man City and Chelsea, who they are sort of teams up around them. So big game for Arsenal. They're going to be missing some of their key players. But look, if Arsenal come out of this with a draw, would it still be considered a good result? I think they missed an opportunity last week. Not to say that a point at Stamford Bridge is a bad result, but they play against 10 men for so long. And to be honest, Chelsea didn't look like they were doing 10 men. So I watched the butt of them against Brentford the other night, and I think Mikel Arteta is very, very much a manager who, if he's got his best 11 available, he wants to play them. He doesn't rotate as much as maybe the likes of Pep Guardiola does. And I just wonder with some of the injuries they're getting, and this is one of the criticisms that some of the Arsenal fans have labelled at Arteta over previous seasons, is in the second half of the season, they've had countless injury problems because they've maybe overplayed them in the first part of the season. And already now we're starting to see there's a little bit of a problem at centre-back. Timbers had to go in there on Wednesday night, who's a natural fullback. So it doesn't matter how good you are as a coach or how many good players you have. If you're having to chop and change players and maybe not play them in their best positions, it can definitely hurt you. I don't think it was the best Arsenal team that played against Chelsea. They got over the line against Brentford the other night without playing that well, but this is a much bigger test at Villa Park on Saturday.
You mentioned some of the injured players there. It is expected that Declan Rice will feature in this game at Villa Park. He's come out and said that he is ready. Talking about draws, though, Gareth, Arsenal have actually drawn their last couple of away games in the Premier League at Sunderland 2-2 and their last away game 1-1 at Stamford Bridge against Chelsea. Of course, last time out, they beat Brentford at the Emirates midweek. Now, and also, at no away ground have Arsenal won more Premier League games than they have against Aston Villa at Villa Park, 15, level with Selhurst Park. How do you see this one going? Because last season at Villa Park, Arsenal won 2-0.
Yeah, I remember this game, Chris. It was the second game of the season. It was Arsenal's first away game. I remember watching this in the pub. And Aston Villa absolutely battered them. It was a game where Raya made 2 wonder saves.
If you remember watching it in the pub, you didn't drink enough, did you?
It was early on a Saturday, I think it was, after football. But it was the one where Watkins must have opened net, if that refreshes your memory. But Arsenal would only won up 2-0. I think the first goal was quite fortunate. We had deflection, and then they finished the game off. But a game that could have went the other way. If you think back to the season before, I remember it was around Christmas time as well. John McGuinness scored very early, and Villa would only won the game 1-0. And I think Villa went to the top of the league just before Christmas that season. It was about 2 seasons ago. So there have been some dramatic games between these two teams over the last few seasons, and I think it always adds that extra layer because of the Unai Emery connection. Some Arsenal fans feel he didn't get a fair shot at it.
True, yeah.
Maybe how much Arteta's got. Emery has went on and won with Villarreal. He's got Villa into the Champions League. So he's proven that he is a good manager. but he just maybe wasn't the right manager at the right time for Arsenal. But it always adds an extra layer, and I think it's a brilliant way to kick off the weekend. And personally, I think it could go either way, especially with Arsenal's just not going to be their full strength team.
Gareth, I don't know why. I really want Aston Villa to win this game, and I'm going to say my score prediction based on hope, if anything. I'm going to go 1-0 Aston Villa, and I'd love to see it blown wide open, because it's never easy as a neutral fan. And of course, as a Spurs fan, we don't want to be seeing them top of the league, and certainly we don't want to be seeing them winning the league. But I just feel like for the entertainment value of all football fans, it's so much better, isn't it, when there's a fair few teams involved in a title race. So I hope that it does get blown wide open on Saturday, and certainly over this weekend. I'm going to go for a 1-0 Aston Villa win. What are you going to go for?
Yeah, as I says, I think Villa come into this game with a lot more hope than they would have done maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago. I mean, It was only towards last month we were talking about Arsenal not even conceding a shot on goal, but they've actually been conceding some goals recently. You think about Spurs scored against them, Bayern Munich scored against them, Chelsea scored against them, Sunderland scored 2 against them. So they haven't looked as invincible at the back as they have been in previous weeks. So I think that's probably down to the fact that Saliba and Gabriel, I think Saliba was injured first, now Gabriel. So that partnership's been breaking up, and they're definitely not as strong with those two. They say Rice is going to be fit. It's a big one. I don't know if he will start the game, but if he does, it definitely won't be the Declan Rice at 100% fitness that we've seen. So I think it gives well an opportunity. I do think there'll be goals in this game. I know there doesn't tend to be a lot of goals in the Arsenal games, but I'm going to go for a high score and 2-2 draw, Chris.
Okay. Right, next up, Bournemouth take on Chelsea. Now, Bournemouth at the moment are down in 14th. Chelsea are 4th. Now, Chelsea were on a good run in the Premier League, and midweek they lost 3-1 against Leeds at Ellen Road. Now, Gareth, talk to me, before we talk about Chelsea, talk to me about Bournemouth. What on earth has happened to Andoni Iraola's side here? Because their last 5 Premier League games, a 3-1 away defeat at Man City, then a 4-0 away defeat at Aston Villa, then drawing 2-2 at home against West Ham, and then losing 3-2 away at Sunderland, and most recently losing 1-0 at home against Everton. What on earth has happened there?
I think it's a bit of a mix of bad fortune and also certain players like Semenyo, his form's dipped a bit. He started the season unbelievably, didn't he? It was always going to be difficult for him to keep up that kind of numbers. He was posting at the early stage of the season. Very good player, but it's coincided with a lot of talk about his future. So I don't know maybe if that's distracted him, Chris. We're hearing a lot of reports about this release clause, and it's kind of coincided with a dip in form for Semenyo. So maybe it's a bit of a distraction for him and Bournemouth at the minute. If you look at some of the games, the Man City game, they were undone by Erling Haaland. Bournemouth had as many chances in the game as Man City. That could have been a different game, but ultimately Haaland was the difference. The West Ham game, I think, is the one that they'll be really disappointed with, because I've seen West Ham in the last 2 matches against Liverpool and Man United, and both of those teams aren't in great form or playing that well. I know United will point to being only losing 1 in the last 8, but there have been a lot of draws on there, and the performances recently, and Gary Neville's been critical of them, and we'll speak about United in a bit, but I think that'll be the one that hurts them, that West Ham looks so average against those two, that how did they end up getting 2-0 up at Bournemouth? Now, I know Bournemouth pummeled them after that, and I think they had one of the highest XGs in the league this season, but couldn't find a winner. The Sunderland one, I mean, it was arguably the game of the season. I watched it, I think it was last week or the week before, 2-0 up, and they had Sunderland where they wanted them, but Sunderland at the minute, Chris, are one of those teams that don't seem to give up. They went to Anfield the other night, and they didn't look out of place, and they're a very hardy, resilient, hard-working, fit team. And I think we're seeing I think we're seeing the evidence, Chris, this season that the teams that are the most dynamic, are the most fit, are the best set pieces, or can score goals and provide entertainment, are doing really well. And Sunderland are one of those. They've arguably been the story of the season. So it was a bit of a bad one for Bournemouth. They lose 2-0 up, but Sunderland are going well. The Everton game doesn't surprise me, because I think Everton have been flying under the radar. They're a much better team than they've been in previous seasons. So yes, it's a tough spell for Andoni Iraola, but at the start of the season, I don't think anyone expected Bournemouth to be as good as they were last year, due down to the fact they lost 3 of their back 4. So that was always going to come into play at some point. But I've no doubts about Iriol as a manager. I've no doubt Bournemouth will get back on the horse sooner rather than later. And you could argue this is the perfect time to play Chelsea, because I think it was last year, Chris, at Christmas, when everyone was talking about Chelsea as potential title contenders. It's almost like they couldn't handle it. They play Arsenal with 10 men, probably deserved to win the game. Everybody's saying, oh, maybe they are title contenders this season. Next game up, Leeds, who can't win a game, they go and get turned over 3-1. And we're seeing the same things come back on the Chelsea's game, where the goalkeeper's not good enough to be in a title-winning team. The defenders aren't good enough to be a title-winning team. And it almost feels like history is repeating itself with last season with Chelsea. Yes, they've got better. They aren't relying on Haaland as much, but there's still massive holes in that squad for Chelsea to be gone and be title contenders for me. So fancy them for a top 4, top 5 spot, but at the minute, I think that's as good as as far as they can go. But this will be a challenge, and I think it's possibly the perfect game for Bournemouth. They bounce back because they do tend to do well against teams in the top sort of 5 or 6 or the big 6, as they say.
Previous meetings between these sides played 19. Bournemouth have won 4, Chelsea have won 12, and 3 games finishing as a draw. Bournemouth are winless in their last 7 Premier League games against Chelsea, drawing 3 and losing 4, having won 3 of their previous 4 against the Blues, losing 1. And Chelsea have lost just 1 of their 8 Premier League away games against Bournemouth, winning 5 and drawing 2, going down 4-0 in January 2019. What are you going to go for?
I am leaning towards a Bournemouth 1. I think this run will end at some stage. And I think that's a bad result for Chelsea the other night, and I think that might have an impact on the mentality of them. So I'm going to say that Bournemouth are going to win an absolute classic, Chris. I think there's going to be a lot of goals in these games this weekend. Well, definitely these 2 games we've started with. I'm going to go for a Bournemouth 3-2-1.
3-2 is interesting. I'm going to go 3-3.
Yeah,
I agree. I agree with you. I think there's going to be a lot of goals in that game. Entertainment. Yeah. Right. Next up, 3 p.m. kickoff at the Hill Dickinson Stadium. Everton against Nottingham Forest. Everton are currently 10th. Nottingham Forest are 16th. Everton have 21 points. Nottingham Forest have 15. Both teams won their respective previous games. Everton winning 1-0 at Bournemouth, like we just mentioned, and Nottingham Forest winning 1-0 at Molineux against Wolves. Like you just said there, Gareth, about Everton, they do look a different team. I know, like when I've spoken to Everton fans in the previous last couple of seasons, that their main focus was just staying in the Premier League, but surely they've got to be aiming a lot higher this year.
Definitely, Chris. I think they'll look at the league the way it is this year, with Spurs struggling, United struggling, Liverpool struggling. There is an opportunity there for them to break into one of those European spots. Maybe not the Champions League, but Europa League or Europa Conference League, or maybe even have a go at the FA Cup. I was disappointed with them earlier in the season when they sort of rotated their team and went out of the League Cup, because we've seen the effects of what it's like to win a trophy after such a long period, and Everton have been waiting a lot longer than us. The scenes in Bilbao were amazing. You look at Crystal Palace's scenes, Newcastle scenes, teams that went through a long, long spell. We had a trophy. I think Palace might have won their first ever. So Everton are on that bracket of a team that they're too big of a club. They go this long with a trophy. So I would imagine now that they're in a much more secure position, they'll have a real good go at the FA Cup. And I think they're one of those teams that can give anyone a game on their day. I think David Moyes is a brilliant manager. It didn't quite work at Man United, but everywhere else, maybe not, it didn't work in Sociedad, but everywhere else he's been in England's been a success. You think about West Ham, the job he did there, first time round at Everton. Sunderland was a tough job to win. He tried his best, but he couldn't get them up. But I think he's a very astute manager. I think he's adapted to the modern game, and it's not always something you see the older managers been able to do. That he's recognised that Everton, the fans don't want to see the same sit-back football they've had over a number of years. They're very much a team that at home they'll go on the front foot, and maybe away from home they'll shut up shop a little bit more, and they've got the players in the attacking area. Heard teams like Njai, like Grealish. They're probably missing a centre forward, Chris, so I'll be surprised if he didn't go into the market in January just to get someone up there. It's a bit more reliable. But like we said about Sunderland, Chris, they're now a very dynamic, energetic team, and that's causing teams problems this year that don't have that physicality. So I think Everton are on course for a good season. And it'll be interesting with Sean Dyche going back to Everton, what kind of reception he'll get there. He did keep them up, but it ended on a sour note where the fans kind of wanted him out. So But a needle in this game, just about like the Villa and Arsenal with Emery.
Yeah.
There's an hour. I think it's an hour great weekend, an hour great game this weekend. So yeah, I'm sure this could go either way.
Yeah, I was going to mention Sean Dyche before we talk about him. What a great job he's doing at Forest. You talking about Everton centre forwards? I think I've got the perfect fit for Everton in the January transfer window. Someone called Richarlison would do very well there. Do you think?
Brilliant. I think he would do a brilliant job there. I mean, I think if Richarlison has an option, he probably doesn't want to leave Spurs. But if he feels that if the club and him can come to some sort of agreement, Spurs can get a replacement done, and he wants to stay in England, I think Everton will be the team that he wants to go to, because he's still got that connection with the fans. Whenever we play Everton, there's always a very good connection between those two, and I think Richarlison would be a number one starter there. And I think he's a very emotional player, so I think he still feels very attached to Everton. So I'm sure they'd welcome him back. David Moyes would get the best out of him as well, and he's definitely proven. I think he's a lot more marketable and much more of a buy now, because I think he's managed to stay fit this season, where he hasn't been able to do that in previous seasons. So it wouldn't surprise me. And with in the lead up the summer, of course, we've got a World Cup. He'll want to try and get into that Brazil squad. And if he's playing first team football at Everton, scoring goals, he may well find his way on.
Gav, let's talk a little bit about Sean Dyche. Of course, going to Nottingham Forest since he's returned there. He has done extremely well, and since taking over from Ange Postecoglou. Now, their last couple, or let's have a look at their last three Premier League games, winning 3-0 at Anfield against Liverpool, and then losing at home against Brighton 2-0, and then last time out beating Wolves 1-0 at Molineux. They seem to be climbing up that Premier League table. They're out of the bottom three. What main differences, what have you really noticed that Sean Dyche has done at Nottingham Forest? Because he seems to be very jokey in press conference, doesn't he? And seems to be very entertaining with the journalists in press conferences. Always a very likeable guy. As you mentioned, he's going to be going back to Everton. Of course, it's not Goodison Park. It is the Hill Dickinson Stadium, but of course, it's his former club, which, as you say, it's always a bit of something, a bit of fire, isn't it? When you go back to old clubs, you want to prove a point, you want to win. But what are the main differences that you have noticed at Forest? From Nuno to Ange, then to Sean Dyche now.
Yeah, we can talk about tactics all day, Chris. But I think the most important thing you have to do as a manager, where you walk in a pre-season or you walk in to a team that's struggling, is you have to galvanise the group and get everybody singing off the same sheet. And for whatever reason, Ange wasn't able to do that. I think it was a massive gamble for Ange and Forest to go down that route of changing something so quickly. They went from being a very pragmatic team to let's get on the ball and play. Did he have the players? He had a couple, but he probably didn't have the majority of players to do that. Forest are very much set up to be a counter-attacking team, not really a possession-based team when you look at their squad. So, look, I think Ange was unlucky not to only get 7 games, but I do think Sean Dyche is a better fit. And that's probably where they should have went the first time. But look, he's come on. He's recognised the strengths of the group. They were a team last year that didn't concede that many goals. They were very good in transitions. And if you think back to the Liverpool game, for example, it's very much reminds you of how Forest played last year. Obviously, it's not completely the same. Managers will make little tweaks. And I think the most important thing is he's got the best out of Morgan Gibbs-White. He wasn't performing under Ange, and Nuno didn't have that many games this season, but he didn't start the season particularly well. Maybe a bit of a hangover from the Fails move to Spurs, but he's done really, really well since Sean Dyche has come on. And I think when your best player is back to somewhere near his best, makes a big difference to how you play as a team, and basically how everyone, good players make average players good players. And I think Morgan Gibbs-White's really, really key to that. So, no, I'm expecting a really, really tight physical game here, and it'll be a good watch again. And look, we spoke about it, Chris, when Ange had his way at Spurs, and then Thomas Frank's come on and completely went back. It's very similar to Forest, only the other way around, where they went from being defensively solid, we're going to turn into a team that's going to try and score loads of goals, not worry too much about what's happening at the back. Spurs have went the other way, and they're having the same kind of issues, where it's fans are searching for an identity, and Forest had that with Ange. So Sean Dyche has put that back in motion, and Forest, no worries about relegation for me. They'll be comfortably mid-table or at worst top half of the bottom half.
Just a quick one. Who will finish higher in the league table at the end of the season, Everton or Forest?
Ooh, Everton, just because I think Forest may have a decent run in Europe.
Okay, right. Everton have lost just 2 of their last 11 Premier League games against Forest, winning 7 and drawing 2. Though both of those defeats have come at home in home matches, 1-0 in January 1999 and 2-0 last season. What are you going to go for?
I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw, Chris. Probably no surprise there because I did say it was going to be extremely tight and I was struggling to call it. So I'm going to go for a 1-1.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go for a 1-0 Everton win. That's what I'm going to go for. Right, next up, another 3 p.m. kickoff on Saturday. Manchester City host Sunderland. This should be an entertaining game, this one. At the Etihad. Sunderland are 6th and Manchester City are 2nd. Man City have scored 32 Premier League goals this campaign. Sunderland have scored 18. I've got to say, Gareth, let's start by talking about Sunderland. Isn't it refreshing and isn't it nice to see a team get promoted and start the season so well? And like you said earlier, they just don't give up, do they?
I think that's the one thing that you have to give the manager praise for, is that resilience that they've seemed to have created. I think it probably dates back to, if you think back to Sunderland, 5-6 years ago, the mess they run as a club. I think the new ownership's come on, and I think sometimes the head of the head of the table, the head of the business, if he's got his house in order, it can transfer all over the building. And I think, that's Gary Neville's been very critical with Man United about the people in the background, and that's almost transferred onto the pitch. I think there's that element at Spurs as well, where it's not been that great behind the scenes, and I think that's transferred to the pitch and the fans. And I think at Sunderland at the minute, you see what was once a broken, fractured club and fan base has turned into a really united group off the pitch and on the pitch. And that's, people might overlook that, but that is absolutely critical to success. So the manager deserves massive credit for the way he set up the team. Obviously, they signed a lot of players in the summer, Chris. That's usually that's a negative, but in this case, it's been a real positive. A lot of these players. I watched them against Liverpool. I've not seen all their games. I watched them against Bournemouth, but I thought this would be a really good test going to Anfield. Yes, it's not the Liverpool firing on all cylinders, but still a tough place to go under the lights. And Liverpool needed a win, and Sunderland looked so comfortable. Yes, Liverpool weren't at their best, but credit to Sunderland, they made it very difficult for them, and they looked better than Liverpool on the ball at times. They didn't go there to sit back. Yes, towards the end when they conceded the equaliser, they held on, but for 80 minutes in that game, they won the game, and they pushed Liverpool back for most of the first half. I was looking at some of the signings, and the left back looks a Rolls Royce, and they got him on a free transfer from Atletico Madrid. He looks incredible. The one worry for Sunderland coming up is the dreaded African Cup of Nations. I believe Sunderland are set to lose 7 players, and I think 5 of them started the overnight. So it's not just squad players they're losing key players to the starting XI. So that will be a very, very tough period. How they navigate that will be interesting, but I think where they are at the league in the minute, they can probably afford a few weeks off, because let's be honest, their target was to stay up. But they've put themselves in a fabulous position. I was reading, on average, they need about 10 more points to be safe if we're going off previous seasons. So you just can't see that ever being an issue for them now, the way they're playing. So they'll be going to Man City full of confidence. They'll have seen their promotion partner in Leeds go to Man City last week, and it took Man City to 92 minutes. They won the game. So Sunderland are in a better state than Leeds as well, despite Leeds getting that one the hour night. And Sunderland, keep mentioning it, another very dynamic, energetic team that will probably doesn't suit Man City, because Man City are more of a technical team. They're not the best team in the league off the ball. So you've got 2 different styles here. And I wouldn't be surprised if Sunderland got a result here on Saturday.
Well, Gareth, if I would say to any football fan that a team has conceded 6 goals in their last 2 Premier League games, you would have expected them to have lost at least one of them, if not both of them. The Man City have conceded 6 in their last 2, but they've also scored 8. Now, last time out, they beat Fulham 5-4 away at Craven Cottage, and the time before that was a 3-2 home win against Leeds United. Entertaining games. Do you see Man City still as title contenders? Because surely, you talked a little bit about Aston Villa there. Surely, I think that Man City are probably the only team to, go head to head with Arsenal and take them all the way with this Premier League title race.
I think that's based on them being Man City and what we've seen from them over the last few years, based on the Pep Guardiola factor and based on the fact they've got the best striker, or definitely the best goal scorer in world football in Erling Haaland. He broke his 100 Premier League record there, part of that club, 111 games, just incredible numbers. And we spoke about it a lot, Chris. The only way Man City can win it is if he keeps, scoring freak loads of goals, because they're not great at the back. I don't think they're as bad as what they've shown in the last few games. I think these results are probably anomalies, but if they keep conceding that amount of goals, they're not going to be able to win games at the rate they need to win them. It's a difficult one with Man City. You watch them some weeks and you think, brilliant side, not far from being back to where they were, but then they don't perform another week and they look a bit soft. So not that they're nowhere near the Man City that we've seen 2-3 years ago. They're very much an improved Man City from last year, but they haven't got that feeling about them that they can go and win 10, 11, 12 games like they could under Pep a number of years ago. So, no, I think they're a team that are top 4 at best. Erling Haaland may well fire them into a title contention talk at some stage. But the worry is if he gets injured, Chris, I think they're in a battle for the top 4 or top 5 if the teams below them improve, because even though Phil Foden's come on the form, you can't rely on him every week to score goals. He's not that type of player. So if Haaland was injured, he would be able to fill his void. I know not many can, but fill a void of scoring enough goals to win games. So Man City would be petrified if anything happens to him. But for now, he's fit and firing, and you wouldn't back against him scoring again this weekend.
Would you think that Man City would go big in the January transfer window if they are in a good spot in the Premier League table and still competing for the Premier League title with the likes of Arsenal? And we heard from Sky Sports last week that Man City, Spurs, Liverpool are all interested in Antoine Semenyo. I know I've mentioned him already on this stream, but would you expect Semenyo to go in January and possibly sign for, because if you had the choice, Gareth, Man City, Liverpool, Spurs, who are you joining?
Well, that's it. I don't think Spurs even enter the conversation, to be honest, between those two. Do you bet on Liverpool getting back to where they were last season, or do you go with Pep Guardiola, Man City? Probably Man City, just based on the manager. But, he plays on the same side as Doku does, who's been just as good as Semenyo this season. So, does he play on the other side? Where does that leave some of the other players that are there at Man City? I'm not sure. I mean, there's a lot of links with Semenyo, all these top clubs. I'm not sure he's what Man City need at the minute. I'm not sure he's what Liverpool needs at the minute. I think these teams need defensive reinforcements.
Well, that's it. We'll have him.
Yeah, we'll have him. The one that jumps out for me, and I think he is an Arsenal fan, is the Arsenal one, because they haven't really nailed down anyone on that left side. As he's played out there at times, but he's better centrally. Martinelli and Trossard chop and change a lot, and Trossard's getting older. There's no one really on that side that's nailed down that spot. So I think that's one they watch with Arsenal and Semenyo.
Right, so Man City against Sunderland. Man City have won their last 6 Premier League games against Sunderland, with this the first meeting since a 2-0 away win back in March 2017. What's your score prediction for this one?
Do you know what, Chris? If it wasn't the third game of a Premier League week, I would think Sunderland would have more of an opportunity. I'm just worried that maybe Man City might be a bit fresher because they can make changes, as they maybe Sunderland maybe don't have the level of player to come in that they have been starting games, and that was a big effort they put on against Liverpool on Wednesday night. So I'm just erring on the side of Man City, so I'm going to go with 2-1 Man City. Yeah,
I agree. 2-1. Next up, another 3 p.m. kickoff on Saturday. Newcastle United back at St James's Park hosting Burnley. Newcastle are currently 12th. Burnley are down in 19th. Now, Newcastle so far this Premier League campaign have scored 19 to Burnley's 10. Burnley's 15. Now, of course, last time out for Newcastle, it was Spurs 2-2 draw. Before that, they won 4-1 away at Everton. And Burnley have lost their well, they're on a losing streak. They've lost to Arsenal. They've lost to West Ham. They've lost to Chelsea. They've lost to Brentford. And last time out, they've lost to Crystal Palace. They are not having a good time in the Premier League right now, Burnley. Do you expect them to go down, Gareth? And Newcastle, when you look at them in 12th, I know it's very tight in the Premier League right now, particularly in that mid-table area. They're in a false position, aren't they?
Well, we'll start with Burnley, Chris, because you mentioned them there first. So I'll listen to Scott Parker's press conference after the game against Palace there in midweek. I kind of got that feeling that he believes that they're unsavable. I think they had a bit more resilience at the start of the season. You were difficult to beat, but that seems to have gone out of them. And look, I think that's just one of the things that happens when you lose so many games is, players lose confidence, they lose belief. And it's difficult for Scott Parker and those Burnley players. They haven't got the quality to go toe-to-toe teams. They didn't do enough in the summer. Will they do much in January? It could depend on the results over the next few weeks, because if they don't pick up any points, you could say that it's over before it even begins, really. So they may just be preparing for life in the Championship. They didn't go down the route that Sunderland did. Maybe the finances aren't there to do what Sunderland did. But they'll be looking at Sunderland's situation. If you look at the two teams between Burnley and Sunderland have a lot more quality. And look, we can all say about managers make a difference. They do, but I think you compare Burnley's squad to the rest of the league. They're down there in the bottom three on merit, so it's going to be difficult. And look, it doesn't get any easier going to Newcastle away. They were on a brilliant run at home before Spurs got that little equaliser, but they're a difficult team to get anything out of there. And I think Eddie Howe will have him pumped up because he was disappointed that they didn't go over the line against Spurs on Tuesday night. And I can't see anything other than Newcastle winning this game. False position, yes, because we know what they're capable of. Certain games they should have won, they didn't win. I mean, I've had time to reflect on the game on Tuesday night against Spurs. Spurs weren't great, but did Newcastle create that much that they deserved to win? They were the better team on the ball at times, but they didn't do enough. They see Spurs off. I think if they had been at their brilliant best, that game would have been over a long time before Spurs got back into it. So that'll be a frustrating one. And Eddie Howe spoke about this a lot, that they've played brilliant in one game and they've struggled in the next game. And I think that's often coincided with midweek games, whether it be the Champions League, a League Cup game, or the Premier League as it went into its first sort of midweek match round. The Newcastle we've seen against Everton away, which is a difficult place to go. We didn't get that Newcastle again on the Wednesday. So there is something in that, Chris. As a squad, maybe they're just not good enough to compete all season, 3 games a week. But I fully expect them to bounce back here with a win against Burnley.
Now, Burnley are winless in all 7 of their Premier League away games against Newcastle, drawing 3 and losing 4, with their last league victory at St James's Park coming in April 1976. That is drawing 4 and losing 6 since. And Newcastle have lost. What a record this is, Gareth. Newcastle have lost just once in their last 27 Premier League games against promoted sides, winning 17 and drawing 9, going down 1-0 at Luton in December 2023. Their last such home defeat was against Leeds in January 21, and that's 7 wins and 4 draws since. What a great record. I'm going to go for a Newcastle win. I'm going to go for a 3-0 Newcastle win, actually. What are you going to go for?
Yeah, I'm going for an R Newcastle 1, comfortable 2-0 1.
Now, Tottenham Hotspur are in action on Saturday, 3 p.m. kickoff at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. It is being dubbed as the Thomas Frank Derby. Of course, his former club, Brentford, travel to North London. Now, Spurs are in 11th. Brentford are down in 13th. Now, Tottenham Hotspur need a win at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. The last time we won a home game in the Premier League was on the opening weekend when we beat Burnley 3-0. Now, Tottenham Hotspur had lost 3 games on the trot in all competitions against Arsenal, PSG and against Fulham. But midweek, we managed to come back at St James's Park and get a 2-2 draw, getting a point in the Premier League. Gareth, first up, before we talk about the Brentford game, your thoughts on the Newcastle game? Of course, Christian Romero, great header, overhead kick as well. but we failed to have a shot on target in a first half again. The last time we've actually had a shot on target in a Premier League game in the opening 45 minutes was on the 1st of November, and that was against Chelsea.
Yeah, and I think that was their only shot on target in the whole game. So shots on target are at an absolute premium for Spurs at the moment, which is something that you can't really believe that you're hearing. A team that Spurs are kind of billed as a team that scored loads of goals and maybe they don't keep the back door shut. But under Thomas Frank, it's been a real struggle. Not just we've scored goals to be fair, but the XG really worries you, Chris, that we've scored. I think it's 21 goals from an XG of 12. So we're outperforming by over 9 goals, and that's not sustainable. And for all the talk, Chris, of have we got strikers or have we got attackers that are good enough? Well, they're scoring plenty of goals. This team from very little. So there is a bit of a clinical edge to this team. I know a lot of goals are coming from defenders. Mickey Van de Ven's got a few. And of course, Romero got 2 against Newcastle on Tuesday night. So it's a really strange one with Spurs. I mean, that game on Tuesday night, Chris, if you hadn't seen the game, you'd have looked at the end of the game for 2-2. Must have been a great game. But for 72 minutes, neither team really looked like scoring. Newcastle looked slightly more dangerous. But it wasn't like both keepers had a lot to do, and it kind of just all went a bit rogue in the last 20 minutes. But in the end, decent point, but still a lot left to be desired about the performance, Chris.
What positives do you take from Tuesday night? Because, of course, like I mentioned, losing to Arsenal, PSG, Fulham, it was very important that Spurs got points. Now, we got 1 at St James's Park. That, of course, is a positive. Now, also, Gareth, what I wanted to ask is what's your views on Thomas Frank right now? Because it's very, very mixed again, isn't it? The mood amongst the Spurs fan base always seems to be very mixed. Some people behind the manager, some people have given up on the manager. Where do you stand on the manager right now? Can Thomas Frank turn this around? Because like I mentioned earlier, Spurs are 5 points away from the top 4, but we're only 5 points above 17th where we finished last season. Now, it's very, very tight in the middle of the Premier League table right now. But like I also mentioned, we need a win. We need a home win.
Well, Chris, we spoke about it, that the next 2 home games in the Premier League were going to be crucial. Because we were playing arguably the 2 worst away teams in the league. Fulham was a disaster. They won their first away game of the season at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. And Brentford, I believe, have lost 6 out of 7 away games, only 1-1 away at West Ham. So they're a team that struggles on the road, and this would have been viewed as another big opportunity to break that home curse. Because if you look at the fixtures coming up, Forest away, Liverpool at home. And yes, Liverpool have their problems, but it's always a difficult game. I think we've got Palace away, Brentford away, which will be a lot tougher than playing them at home. Sunderland at home, who've been flying. Bournemouth away. I mean, it's a very difficult run after this, in my opinion. So, this is our best opportunity to get 3 points between now and the end of Christmas, I believe. So it's a huge game. Yes, it seems to be a very funny weekend, Chris, of managers returning to play former teams. This is the 3rd game already. So it's going to be edgy because of that. But Brentford must be coming to the stadium thinking, if we could have handpicked an away game this week at Spurs, because if they were going to a Wolves, for example, who can't win a game, there's pressure on Brentford to win that. But all the pressure here is on Spurs, and that could play into Brentford's hands. And I watched Brentford against Arsenal on Wednesday night, and they made it very, very difficult for Arsenal. They never conceded that many chances. So you can be sure that Keith Andrews has got a plan in place for how to hurt Spurs. It's 2 teams that play a very similar style. Both teams like to play on set pieces, like to get long throws under the box. So I don't think it's going to be the most entertaining game, Chris. I think if you looked at all the games on Saturday, this is probably the game that you feel it may be the lowest scored game of the weekend and probably the most unwatchable. But I think where Spurs are at the minute, Chris, I think we would just take anything to break this home record and get a 1. Well, that's sustainable. But I think the most important thing this weekend is just getting a 1 at home and trying to build some confidence in this group, because there isn't a lot to get behind at the moment. The players don't look totally behind the system and the style of play. There's been reports some players look a bit disenfranchised. There's been arguments that the fans are at home are affecting the players, and it just all seems like excuses to me, Chris. I mean, if you're good enough, you go out there and you get 3 points no matter what. These players are professional. They've played in teams that, yes, it'd be difficult sometimes to get results, but player for player, Spurs are a lot stronger than Brentford. So there really shouldn't be any excuses on Saturday if we don't get 3 points.
And your opinions on Thomas Frank right now?
Chris, I mean, I said it last week that I think there's a possibility that he could be gone by Christmas, and I don't think everybody was agreeing with that. But I don't think this week has changed my mind. Fulham was a disaster. Newcastle away.
What do you say? Well. What do you say to the people, the fans that are really behind Thomas Frank and say, look, these things take time. You've got to be patient with it. And when we get the likes of Maddison, Kulusevski, Solanke back, things are going to be very different. What do you say to those fans? Because I have spoke to so many fans in the last couple of weeks, and honestly, Gareth, I would literally say 50-50 of people saying, oh, this is really boring football, blah, blah, blah. And then I've talked to loads of people who say, when we get all of these creative players back, Thomas Frank will get these players playing. He'll get, everyone ticking and everything will be great. And we'll be playing entertaining football and we'll be scoring goals, creating chances. We won't have this XG, these dreadful XG stats that we keep reading out, after each show. Where do you stand on it?
Well, I think I says it as well in the past, Chris, that these fans that want to give the manager time, I totally understand that a manager needs time. I coach myself. I know it's not easy, and I know it's very difficult at professional level because the pressure and the scrutiny that Thomas Frank's under, he's not used to it because he came from Brentford. But show me the evidence that tells me we're going to get better anytime soon. We've been in a dire straits now for the last number of weeks. The performances haven't got any better, in my opinion. Yes, we got a decent point there, all right, but it wasn't a pretty watch. I think 2 shots on target, 2 goals. We're really struggling. It's basically got to the point that if we get 2 shots on target, we need to hope they go on because we're not going to get any more than that. So I'd like to see some shines of improvement for me to get behind this coach. Of course, I'm behind him, but for me to keep giving him more time, I need to see something. And I was hoping this would be the period that we would do it. Fulham at home, Newcastle away, Brentford at home, Slavia Prague. You need to show me in these 4 games because if it doesn't happen in these 4 games, the next 4 are much more difficult. So I'm struggling to see how it would happen in any of those games. Yes, we can talk about injuries all day long, but every club's got injuries, Chris. Every club in every season gets injuries. I know it's been unfortunate that it's happened to Kulusevski and Maddison, but Ange had a back 4 last year that was completely, not equipped for this level, and he still found ways to get them to play out and score goals. Yes, we were conceding a lot, but we still were a decent watch at times. And when he did get players back, he did feel that when players come back, we'll get better. I don't know if it's the same with Thomas Frank because Thomas Frank's strengths have been, being solid at the back, but that seems to have gone in recent weeks. We conceded another 2 goals in midweek. There seems to be a lot of shots from outside the box. There's not enough pressure on the ball. I watched Newcastle press us in that first half. Our press was nowhere near as good as Newcastle's. So I'm just not seeing enough for me at the moment to be convinced that this manager is going to be what's good for Spurs in the future. I really hope I'm wrong, but I think this is it, Chris. Next 2 home games, if we don't at least win one of them, I think his job becomes untenable. If you can't beat Fulham, Brentford, and Slavia Prague at home, with all these other results, all the damning XG numbers, the style of play, I just don't see how he could remain in his job. I think we would have to change it up. And even if it is just an interim, we need to get the feel-good factor about Spurs because we people are saying already about writing the season off, but it's not just about that, Chris. We've got another, 10, 11, 12 home games, possibly more if we go further in Europe and the FA Cup. Who wants to sit through this all season between now and the end of between now and May? I mean, it's deflating every week at home when you can't really create an opportunity. Never mind win a game. We're not creating enough to win games. So it's got to change, and it's got to change this weekend and Tuesday night against Slavia Prague. We need to get back to where we were against Copenhagen. I know Copenhagen aren't they aren't the creme de the creme, but we cut them into pieces at times, and we need to find a way to do that more often. And if that happens, the fans will get on board, because we're realistic. We know this team still needs work and we need better recruitment. But those players are a lot better than what they're showing at the moment. A lot better.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, desperately need a win at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium Saturday afternoon. Now, Spurs have lost just one of their 8 Premier League meetings with Brentford, winning 4 and drawing 3, winning each of the last 3 in a row. Brentford have lost 3 of their 4 Premier League away games against Spurs, with the exception of a 3-1 win at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in May 2023. Spurs have lost their last 3 Premier League London derbies. Gareth, how do you expect Thomas Frank to set up in terms of formation and in terms of personnel? Because one thing is for sure, we can never, as Spurs fans, guess a starting 11 under Thomas Frank. And at the moment, it's quite difficult to even predict what formation he's going to play.
Well, Chris, I don't want to sound disrespectful to the manager, but I'm not sure right now he knows what team he's picking tomorrow, because apparently what we're hearing, he keeps changing it at the last minute, and it's frustrating the players, whether it's team selection, formation, instructions. And I'm not saying you believe everything you hear in reports, but it doesn't surprise me, because when you see him making the subs, they get absolutely peppered with information before they go on. It takes forever for Spurs to get a sub onto the pitch because there's so much instructions. And he seems to go back to his seat a lot and be watching stuff on that iPad setup. And, I would love to know what is being said. I would love to hear the conversations that he's having with his coaching staff, because he was writing stuff down on his notepad a lot. And I would love him to write down what he thinks is going well or what's working, because there's a lot more that's not working. I mean, for me, there wouldn't be enough paper to write on, because there's so many problems. I'm struggling here to pick out the positives. A lot better from set pieces. That is it. I don't know what else has got better. We're not as good at playing out of the back. You could argue maybe our defenders are scoring more goals, but for me, I want my attackers scoring the goals. Yes, it's great having players they pop up with goals. Fullbacks keeps chopping and changing that. Doesn't know what his favourite 2 are. Midfield seems to change a lot. Then when he brings Palhinha and Bentancur in, we look incapable of breaking teams down, especially at home. Chopping and changing on the wide players a lot. And I am so confused as to what the actual plan is. And I don't know whether they're doing that many things, trying to change that many things, that they're almost just completely stuck on what they do. And that's why the formation's changing a lot. The personnel is changing a lot. And he keeps referring to it as being rotation. But for me, it's not rotation. I just don't think he has an idea of what his best formation is, what his best 11 is. And basically, if somebody asked me now, if somebody asked Thomas Frank, what is your identity? What is your Tottenham's team identity? I don't know how you could answer it without talking a load of gibberish, because I don't know what we are. We're not a team that looks particularly well organised when we sit back and have a plan to counter-attack. We're not a team that has an idea of how to break teams down when we're on the ball. So I am lost at the minute, Chris, with this whole Thomas Frank project, to be totally honest with you.
Do you think that Thomas Frank thinks that it is going well then in the Premier League? And no manager would want this winless run to continue, certainly at home. Like I mentioned at the very start, to only win once at home in the Premier League, and now we're on the 5th of December when we're having this chat. Also, Gareth, what I wanted to ask, in his press conferences, I don't think I've sat through a press conference where I've not heard the words principles and layers. What does he mean by principles and layers all the time? Because he mentions it all the time. Layers in terms of what? And, when I mention the home record, Tottenham have won just 3 of their last 16 Premier League home games in 2025, drawing 3 and losing 10. It's Tottenham's lowest win rate across a calendar year in our league history, 19%. Meanwhile, our 10 home defeats this year is also a joint high for the club, along with 1994 and 2003. And I can tell you what, 1994 at that point is we had injuries galore, and things weren't good at that point.
Yeah, I mean, he keeps referring to those 2 phrases, like you pointed out. But what I've noticed him say in his interviews and his press conferences a lot is he talks a lot about what the opposition did in the game, and that really worries me. That he'll say that if he's asked a question about the creativity, he'll put it back as our team didn't create a lot either. We only conceded 4 or 5 shots in the game. We low XG. So it's almost like he's feeling that he's being justified because teams aren't creating as many chances as they were last year against us. But we're not winning enough games, and that is the truth, Thomas. That nail has got to be nailed on his head. That you can talk about the stats all day long, but Spurs, for me, they've got to have the lowest attacking numbers in the league. I think it's in the bottom 3 or 4. So that is shameless for the quality that he's got at his disposal. Yes, he's missing players, but he's still got a lot better than some of the other teams in the league. And for me, if you lose a game 2-1, like we did against Fulham, and he says, oh, well, after the first 10, 15 minutes, they didn't create anything. Well, they were 2-0 up in the game. So I don't know what relevance that's got to the conversation. What did your team do to try and get back into the game? It needed a kudos wonder strike, and all or not, we didn't create anything, bar a couple of huffs and puffs in 85 plus out of time minutes against a team that couldn't win a game away from home. So no, I've completely checked out Chris with his press conferences, and I used to look forward to the press conferences under Ange. And look, I know Ange had his flaws, but there was a charisma there. It was entertaining. I used to enjoy Pochettino's press conferences. I don't know why anyone even tunes into these press conferences, because 1, he speaks in riddles. 2, it's a lot of it's complete nonsense. And 3, I'm not seeing anything. He keeps saying that these layers, I'm not seeing any layers being added. If anything, we're getting worse.
Gareth, a lot of people who probably listen and watch this clip will say that you're being very negative about Spurs. Some people will say you're being realistic and you're saying exactly how it is. We're going to have a mixed reaction. There's absolutely no doubt about that. What positives do you see under Thomas Frank since he has arrived?
Well, that's it. Maybe we've got a bit better from set pieces, defending them and scoring from them. Style of play, there's nothing about that excites me. I'm really struggling, Chris, to be honest. I don't know what our positives there is, because you could say up until a few weeks ago, maybe the away form was a positive, but if you can't win a game at home, it doesn't matter how good you are away from home, because you're only dealing in 50% of the games. So, and our away form has not been that good in the last few weeks. I mean, we were beating Paris, we were beat up at Arsenal. Newcastle away, decent point, but performance wasn't great, and on an hour day we could have lost that. So look, Chris, I take no pleasure in sitting here and being negative. I was actually quite positive last year, even when the results were poor up until a certain point around January, February time, that let's give Ange more time, because I'm seeing butts here that when he gets players back, it could get better. Unfortunately, in the league, it went really bad in that second half of the season, but you could argue that he did put a lot into Europe. Romero and Van de Ven, even when they were fit, didn't play a lot in the Premier League, and even when they did, they only played maybe 45 minutes because he wanted to keep them fresh for Europe, and in the end, that paid off. Would we have been any better on the Rams this season? I'm not sure, but I can tell you one thing for sure: we'd have been a lot more entertaining. And if you can't win games of football, at least give the fans something to get behind. At the minute, we're doing nothing. We're getting beat up easily. Any team coming to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium must be sensing they can win. And I think that's the biggest indictment you can give this squad of players and manager, that we could be playing a team in the FA Cup at home this weekend, and they would fancy their chances of getting a win here. So that has got to change. Yes, Thomas Frank's only here since August, but he's had some favourable home games, and the record's not getting any better. So he has to take his hand in this, and God help tomorrow if we don't score early in that game, Chris, the fans are going to be on the backs of the players right away. We've got to go out there with aggression, intensity, with the belief, get the ball moving, play aggressive football, get the fans on side, give them the arms up, get anything to get them behind the team and get a win, because I can guarantee a win tomorrow will have a massive release on the club, the players, the manager, and the fans. And we've always talking about, Chris, connections are broken at the moment, but connections can be fixed. And the best way to fix connections is winning games of football, especially in your own backyard. So it's got to start tomorrow against Brentford, and it's got to be followed up on Tuesday against Slavia Prague. And as it says, Chris, forget about the positives. Don't win those 2 games. It's P45 out the door. Not good enough for me.
On the opponents, Brentford, of course, Keith Andrews took over from Thomas Frank. Of course, he was the set-piece coach. What have you made of the job that he has done so far? Some people within Brentford have come out and said that not much has changed since Thomas Frank has left because everything has been pretty much the same. What have you made of the job that he's done? What have you made of Brentford this season? And who are the players that Spurs should really look at? Look at to be threats for Brentford.
Well, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm not glad that Brentford are doing well. Of course, Keith Andrews is a manager, an Irishman. It's always great to see an Irishman do well. He was a very good pundit when he was working on the Ireland games. He was very knowledgeable. I remember Darren Bent saying in the summer when everybody was, criticising the appointment that Brentford made, this is a big risk, this could cost them their status. But the one thing you would say about Brentford, Chris, is they rarely make mistakes when it comes to recruitment. And they've got this appointment spot on, despite all the negativity. Even some of their own fans were questioning it. But Keith Andrews was obviously, he obviously had a higher ceiling than just being a set-piece coach. But he's obviously sat there and learned his trade. And he's done a fantastic job, and it was not an easy job to come into because of the success that Brentford had under Thomas Frank. They lost players in the summer as well, and if anything, they look just as strong, Chris. So now I'm expecting nothing but a tough game against Brentford on a Saturday, and if we're not at the races, Chris, we will get turned over here. Brentford, in my opinion, are a bit more of a better team than Fulham are. I think, yes, Fulham have goals on them, but this Brentford team are a lot more structured. They got a massive threat. They could call this a set-piece derby from long throws because they've got a player that can throw the ball just as far as Danzo, and it's caused teams a lot of problems this season already. So I don't expect the ball to be in play too much in this game. I think both teams will be happy enough with long throws and corners into the box because that's where their most successes come from this league. So apologies to anyone going to the game. I really hope it pans out differently and Spurs go about it in a much more proactive way. But all the signs point to it being a really cagey, nervy game.
Good job ticket sales aren't based on what you say.
Well, you go to this game and it'll be a long throw fest.
Mohamed Kudus has 5 assists for Tottenham in the Premier League this season, already just one short of his highest return in the competition for West Ham in the 23-24 campaign. And Thiago has scored 9 goals in his last 8 Premier League starts for Brentford, with these goals worth 8 points to the Bees. Gareth, lastly, what team do you think that Thomas Frank will go with? What formation will he go with? And score prediction?
I don't know. Do you know what? I have a feeling he might bring Danzo on for this game just because of the Brentford long throw. He might have Danzo on there because he probably is our best defender at heading the ball away if Brentford get those chances up near the Tottenham box.
We haven't seen it work. We haven't seen it work yet, though, have we?
No.
These long throws. We haven't seen it work.
No, I get that, but I think he might actually have him on there from a defensive point of view from those long throws as well. So where does he play Van de Ven's the only question, or Romero? That would be the one. So I'm going to say that he's going to come up. We saw him about left field here, and I think if he does this, he could well sign his own death certificate because if he plays Danzo, Romero, and Van de Ven and a 3 at home, they Brentford are back 5, or he plays maybe Van de Ven at left back just to get Danzo into the team. That wouldn't surprise me because Kenny Doggy play again. Spence doesn't entirely look comfortable there. So I'm going to say he's going to go with a back 4. He's going to go with Porro, Romero, Danzo, and Van de Ven as a left back in this game. I think he'll play. He can't go with Polina and Bentancur again. And I don't think Polina is a good player to play at home. I think he's better used away from home. I think Bentancur is much better on the ball than Polina. So Polina or Bentancur will play. I think Bergvall and Simmons. I think he has to play Xavi Simmons. If he doesn't play him in this game, I just don't know what it means for his future under Thomas Frank if he's here for longer. I think he's got to play him in this game. He's on the bench, so it's 4 games in a row, and a lot of different players have started games. He's one of them that hasn't started. I could kind of understand it against Newcastle because they're a big physical team. It's away from home. It's going to be difficult. We may not have as much of the ball. And this game, we should be getting on the ball and dominating. So I think he'll bring someone's in with Bergville, and then could also play on the right. Odobear, I think he will play on the left, and Kolo Muani as a striker. But if I had it my way, I would go Porro, Romero, Van de Ven, Udogi, Bentancur, Bergville, Summons, and then I would go Kudos, Richarlison, Colomani. I think I would go. Just have Richarlison there as an extra attacking threat, because Odobear's done quite well at times when he's played, but he never really looks like scoring a goal. I know he scored one against Copenhagen, but not really a goal threat, whereas Richarlison, he gives you that option. So I would go with those two.
Score prediction?
Oh, says last week, Chris, we would find a way against Fulham in a nervy one. I'm hoping it's going to be, I've got the weeks wrong, and it's going to be this one. I think regardless, it's going to be a nervy game. It's going to end up a draw, or one team's going to nick up by a goal. So just going to tap Spurs to end this terrible record at home, and they're going to win by 2 goals. They won.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going with, Gareth. I think there's a lot of hope. Everything crossed on Saturday afternoon for Spurs to not only give us an entertaining game,
Chris, I'll just answer one of the questions here. Do you think Thomas Frank will be there on the 1st of January? I don't think he'll be there Christmas if we don't win at least one of these next 2 games. And I think if he's going to get that far in January, he's got to pick up at least 2 or 3 wins in December. I don't know how we could justify Thomas Frank being the manager at Brentford on New Year's night if we haven't won a couple of games by then.
Yeah. Well, no easy games in the Premier League. We've gone through this tough run. We've got to come out of it at some point, and let's hope that Saturday afternoon, we're all going to be smiling, Saturday evening, having won at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium for the first time in the Premier League since the opening weekend against Burnley. So best of luck to Thomas Frank and, of course, the squad. Now, Gareth, next up, Leeds United host Liverpool. Leeds, as we've already spoken about, beat Chelsea midweek 3-1. Great win for them. Liverpool, they drew 1-1 against Sunderland. Where do you expect Liverpool to finish this season? Are they actually going to turn it around? Can they put some, really good results together to move up that league table? Because when you look at the league table at the moment, you're not used to seeing Liverpool mid-table.
Yeah, this game's actually the 5:30, as you say, Chris. It's my coaching night out. All the coaches from the club are going out for dinner around this time, so I'm hoping I'll be sitting down with this game with the 3 points in the pocket, or it could be a very long night. But I think this is always a game you look forward to, Leeds Liverpool or Leeds Man United. I think there's a bit of nostalgia in this game. There's been some great Liverpool Leeds games over the years. Liverpool are a real funny one at the minute, Chris, and I don't know. Are they going the same way as Spurs in a way where they're struggling to play at home because of the expectations of winning at home? There's a very funny atmosphere in the stadium on Wednesday night against Sunderland. I think that's 3 or 4 games in a row at home we had a win now. And when is the last time I know they had a bad record.
Do you know, though, Gareth, the weird thing is they've played 14, they've won 7, they've lost 6, they've drawn 1. They've got 22 points. One win could actually put them back in the top 4. And then it's putting them back in the conversation again of, finishing the Champions League spot. If they put a couple of decent results together, i.e. wins, I've no doubt that some people, some fans, some pundits will saying, well, actually, if Arsenal slip, with a few points, Liverpool could be back in it. If all of their players started firing on all cylinders, which we know that they can. Some people, including a lot of Liverpool fans, who I've spoken to certainly, they're saying that they want Arne Slot gone, having won the Premier League for them last season, in his first campaign.
It's as it says, Chris, it's a funny one because I was just about to mention it. I know they went on a very bad home run under Jurgen Klopp the year after they won the league. But that was with no fans there. I think they lost 6 straight games at Anfield. But there was no fans there. So it was a different situation. Liverpool fans are not used to turning up at Anfield and not winning. At worst, they draw. They don't go 4 games without a win at home. And they've lost some of them by heavy scoreline. So, they went to West Ham and it was almost like they relaxed a wee bit away from home. Now, I know the away record's been pretty poor as well up until that. But it almost felt that getting away from Anfield done them a favour. So it'll be interesting to see how they cope on Saturday, but I expect a totally different atmosphere. West Ham away is totally different to Leeds away. We know it's going to be rocking, especially after that one against Chelsea in midweek. There's the beliefs back there. And Chris, we spoke about Daniel Farke being under pressure before, and I says the one thing that you can't say about Leeds at the minute, and I says you should give them more time, is the players haven't given up on the manager. You could see in Leeds' performances that there is something there. They've been just a bit unlucky in games where they maybe have missed chances and the other teams punished them. I think at home they've been basically competitive in every game. The games they've lost, they've only lost them by 1 goal. So it's a bit of a contrast, Chris, to what we're saying about Spurs, where we're not seeing a lot to get behind. I think Leeds fans are still behind Farke, and the board are giving them that opportunity to turn the performances and the results, and that was a brilliant result against Chelsea. Very unfortunate against Man City at the weekend before, conceding late. So Leeds will give Liverpool everything they want, but it is a funny one. Arne Slot was basically like a hero, wasn't he, in the summer? To command the Liverpool your first season after a manager that was viewed as a legend, and he went and won the Premier League first time out with no real transfer window. But it's went completely the opposite way. He doesn't know his best team. The players that he signed hasn't quite worked so far. Van Dijk and Salah have dropped off a cliff. Even the goalkeeper doesn't look anywhere near his best, and it just looks a bit fractured at the moment, and that will be the worry that Liverpool fans have. And I think Jamie Carragher spoke about this on commentary on Wednesday night on Sky Sports. The performances are really, really poor at the moment. A bit like we're seeing with Spurs, Chris, that Liverpool fans are losing hope that this form can turn around, because it's not as if they're battering teams and they've just been a bit unlucky. Sunderland deserved to win that game on Wednesday night, only for a fortunate own goal. And at the end, they were all over the place trying to go for a winner. And the goalkeeper in one pass puts the striker through, who should score and win the game. So it just feels at the moment it's far too easy to get at Liverpool, far too easy to play against them. And yes, it might be good to get away from Anfield, but this is a tough game, and Leeds is going to be really up for this. And they'll sense blood. The fans will be up for it. And I think it'll be a very, very difficult game for Liverpool.
They don't seem to be getting the luck that we're used to seeing, Liverpool. Even you mentioned the own goal there midweek against Sunderland. Wirtz thought that he'd got, or everyone in the stadium thought that he'd got his first Liverpool goal, which would have given him a lot of confidence, going forward. Now, the last time that Liverpool went to Elland Road was in April 23. Liverpool won this one 6-1. And also in the 21-22 season, Liverpool also again put 6 past Leeds. This one was at Anfield. Now, Leeds have won just one of their last 12 Premier League games against Liverpool, drawing 3 and losing 8, beating them 2-1 at Anfield in October 2022. And Liverpool are unbeaten in their last 6 Premier League away games against Leeds, winning 4 and drawing 2. And as I said, winning 6-1 on their last visit to Elland Road back in April 23. Gareth, what are you going to go for?
I think it's going to be another goal-scoring game. Lots of goals in this, I can see. I just have a feeling for Leeds, they go again. I'm going to go for a 3-2, Leeds 1.
3-2. I think I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. And I think that will be... I don't know. I don't see an entertaining game, that one, I must say. Let's move on to Sunday's fixtures. Brighton host West Ham United. Brighton are currently 7th. They've moved up the league table as well, Gareth, picking up points recently. West Ham are down in 18th. Now, Brighton, in their last 4 Premier League games, have beaten Leeds 3-0. They drew 0-0 away at Crystal Palace. They then beat Brentford 2-1 at home. And most recently, they won against Sean Dyche's Nottingham Forest 2-0. West Ham United, last time out, was a home game against Liverpool, losing 2-0. The game before that, they got a 2-2 draw away at Bournemouth. And before that, 2 wins against Newcastle and against Burnley. Firstly, where do you see Brighton finishing this season? And secondly, Nuno Espirito Santo at West Ham, do you see them staying up?
Brighton are one of those teams, Chris, that can go on a great run and then, for whatever reason, they lose one game and it goes completely the other way. But we've seen with Bournemouth. So, yes, it's going well for Brighton at the moment. But that was a body blow. 2-0 up against Villa and lose the game 4-3. Well, that'll be the test. Can they come back from that now? Because they've done this before where they've won a fair few games and then they've went on a losing run in previous seasons. So it'll be interesting to see how they recover. West Ham. I watched the game last night, Chris, against Man United, and I have to say, what a poor advert for the Premier League. It was such a poor game. The lack of quality between both teams was frightening. Yes, Nuno has done a bit better than I expected early on. He is a very well-organised coach, but they created absolutely nothing against Man United. Now, United were poor as well, but never really looked like scoring. Got a goal in the end to get a great point. They didn't do anything against Liverpool, and Liverpool were there for the taking the game before. So West Ham
are West Ham defensively better under Nuno now, would you say?
They're definitely defensively better, and they're not as easy to play against. But there is a massive reliance on Jarrod Bowen. He looked the only player that could do something last night for them, and he had a hand in the goal. So I still think West Ham are going to find it tough. They won games, but I think they'll be okay because of the teams below. I think Burnley and Wolves are cert. Leeds are the one to watch. I think if Leeds were to get their act together and start, if Leeds were to go to beat Liverpool, like I predicted, I think that would send a few shockwaves for West Ham because they wouldn't have banked on 6 points from Chelsea and Liverpool at home. So at the minute, I see Leeds is a lot more competitive than West Ham. I think they're more than likely to give teams better games, but West Ham have Jarrod Bowen, who might be the difference. So between those two, for me, I think the rest of the teams will be okay. Brentford, Fulham, Forest. I think all those teams will be fine. So I think it's between Leeds and West Ham. If Leeds were to beat Liverpool, like I'm predicting, I think West Ham would be up against it. But I can see West Ham going onto the market in January and panicking, really, to be honest, and getting players in. They've got a massive problem up front. Yes, Wilson scored a couple of goals against Bournemouth, but or not, it's Jarrod Bowen really or nothing. So, difficult. I still predict a difficult season for West Ham, but they definitely have a better shot to stand up with Nuno at the helm.
Gareth, with this stat, I think both me and you are going to predict a Brighton score, or a Brighton win, sorry. West Ham have won just 6% of their Premier League games against Brighton, 1 out of 16. Their lowest win rate against any side they have faced more than twice in the competition. My score prediction, I'm going to go for a 2-0 Brighton win. What are you going to go for?
Perfect game for Brighton. They bounced back. They probably couldn't believe their luck when they picked up the fixtures and look this weekend. It was West Ham at home who look really, really poor going forward. I think West Ham will make it difficult for Brighton, but Brighton will find a way. So I'm going to go for a 2-1 Brighton 1.
Okay, right. We're going to move on to the second Sunday fixture. And I must say, I want to mention this. 7 games on Saturday, 2 on Sunday and 1 on Monday. It's like the old days. The majority of the games on the Saturday. I like that.
It's 2 strange games on a Sunday, but when you think about all those great games that we've predicted on the Saturday, the 2 games on Sunday don't jump out at you as being great games.
Yeah. Right, Fulham are back at home at Craven Cottage, having just lost 5-4 against Manchester City. This time they are hosting Crystal Palace. Interestingly, I heard or I saw on TalkSport the other day that Simon Jordan is taking his son to his first ever game. As a Crystal Palace fan, so he's going to be sitting. I don't think it's going to be the away end, is it? It's going to be in a nice executive area or a box at Fulham. Yeah,
but he won't be eating out of a food bank either. I'll tell you that.
No, but he hasn't watched Crystal Palace live for 15 years.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. I'm a massive Simon Jordan fan. I think he's brilliant on TalkSport. I think he's glamorized that channel. You know. Obviously, it's been a big channel for years, but I just think there's something about Jim White and Simon Jordan on Monday to Thursday. Biggest compliment I gave him, I don't really tune in on a Friday between 10 and 1. I always tune in when I'm at work on a Monday and Thursday. I think it's a brilliant show, and Simon Jordan just calls it how it is. And I think he's got a he's very, very knowledgeable, but I think he has a way of saying things as well. And he doesn't put an agenda in there. If someone has to be says, he'll say it. He obviously got a lot of flack off the Tottenham fans with the Daniel Levy connection, but I think a lot of the things that he said about Daniel Levy was quite reasonable. So yes, of course, there's going to be fans. Oh, he's just sticking up for his mate, but I thought he was very, very knowledgeable. I mean, he did criticize Levy at times as well. So no, it's great that he's taking his Sunday, his first game, and look. I think it'd be great to see Palace won for his kid, and maybe Simon Jordan could be back on his red and blue scarf. Who knows anytime soon? But look, it's a London derby. You'd expect it to be competitive. Both teams, you don't really know what you're going to get. I think Palace started the season really, really well, but they've not been as consistent in recent weeks. Palace actually travel over to Ireland on Thursday, a few hours away from me, to play Shelburne in the Conference League. It'll be a big, big game for them. But I imagine that'll be a brilliant, brilliant atmosphere down there in Dublin for the game. And Crystal Palace, believe it or not, now probably have a lot more, and fair play to Glasner for giving them this with the FA Cup one, but it's probably given more of a stellar name than it would have done a few years ago. So there's a lot of people in Ireland looking forward to that game. A lot of just neutral fans looking to get tickets for the game, because we don't often see Premier League teams come over here for a competitive game. So I'll be looking forward to that, not tuning in for that game. But just in terms of this game, you'd probably say Fulham or Crystal Palace are favourites based on what we know what Palace are capable of. But Fulham are another team, you just don't know what you're going to get. They're a bit more reliable at home. Maybe even though they lost the game, that might feel like a good result there on it, because they were 5-1 down, and the stadium Fulham's never really a place you see that's bouncing or great atmosphere, but it was electric there when they were chasing for that equaliser. So they'll be trying to recreate that energy and that atmosphere for them against Crystal Palace. But difficult game for them. We know Palace, and they're a very, very capable side.
Some people would say that was a surprise result, Gareth, losing at Selhurst Park against Manchester United 2-1. I know, when since the start of this season, when we've been doing these Premier League prediction shows, you and I have actually raved about Oliver Glasner and the job that he has done at Selhurst Park. They're currently fifth, by the way, 23 points that they've got. They've scored 18 goals this season. They've had some really good results. They've performed really well as well. Crystal Palace won this exact fixture 2-0 in Feb, ending a 6-game winless run against Fulham in the Premier League, drawing 4 and losing 2. And Crystal Palace won 2-0 against Brentford in their last Premier League London derby. They've not won consecutive derby matches since April 2017 against Chelsea and Arsenal. But I tell you what, when I read stats like that out, I always think that Oliver Glasner, if anyone's going to do it, he will at Crystal Palace. I tell you what, Crystal Palace are not going to want to lose Oliver Glasner to another club, are they?
And Chris, the biggest surprise about last week was they actually went 1-0 up in the game. You couldn't see them going on to lose that game, but they didn't play well.
Yeah.
I think it's worrying. The worrying thing for Crystal Palace is after the game, Glasner exploded, didn't he? About the lack of backing and the lack of recruitment. And I think he's putting the signs out there that he's not going to be there next year. I just don't see that.
But the thing is, when a manager goes into a football club and they are not seen as, one of the top clubs in the division, and he goes and wins them the FA Cup, they go and win the Charity Shield, and they get that feel and they get that feeling of success. They win trophies. Like Mark Gay at the moment, he's obviously wanting to leave and move to another football club in the summer, but you don't win trophies everywhere. The trophies don't come very often at certain clubs, particularly Crystal Palace. And when a manager does such a great job and puts great foundations in, and they play some good football, very difficult to beat, he has transformed that team and that squad and that football club there. You do expect that back in when you've done a good job. It's like, I don't think there is ever a problem of saying to the chairman or the board, look, come on, I've done this, back me. I proved that it works.
I get that to a certain extent, Chris, but there's nothing that the club can do about the Gahey situation. If there's all big teams,
that's just one player. I'm saying, but you've
Ezzy's another one, Chris. Arsenal or Crystal Palace, he's always going to pick Arsenal, so it's a difficult one. I understand where you're coming from, and rightly so. There's different ways they can back him, but at the end of the day, Crystal Palace can attract the top world-class player. It's just not going to happen. So if Glasner came to Crystal Palace as a good manager around Europe, done well at Frankfurt, but he's on a different trajectory now. The Crystal Palace just can't follow him on. So, as I'm saying, I just don't see how it'll continue on past this season. At the end of the day, yes, Crystal Palace won the FA Cup, brilliant. But, as Glasner expecting the Steve Parish to go out and spend 200 million in the summer and turn them into a team that can challenge for top 4 regularly and win Premier Leagues, it's just not going to happen. So I would love to know what he means by the lack of backing, because we're seeing Newcastle, who've got all the money in the world, can't spend it because they don't generate enough revenue. Crystal Palace don't make anywhere near enough the same revenue as Newcastle. So realistically, what can they do that they're not doing? They're a very well-run club that sell players for big profit and they replace them, and they're a consistent Premier League team. They've had their day in the sun. I'm sure they want more of it and they would like more of it. I think Steve Parish is a very ambitious chairman, to be honest. I think he does want to get Palace and the Europe more regularly. But you can only build. You can't build a house in one day. You have to build block by block, and it's not going to be done in the time that Oliver Glasner wants it to be done on. So it's all roads point to it being his last season at Crystal Palace.
But I suppose my point, Gareth, is that Oliver Glasner couldn't have done any more at that football club to then be able to say to the board or Steve Parish, look, I've done this. What more can I do? And I think he's done a great job there. Fulham Crystal Palace. What's your score prediction?
1-1, Chris.
I'm going to go for a Crystal Palace win. I'm going to go for a 2-1 Palace win. Yeah.
I think you back Palace every week.
Well, he's done a good job. Yeah. Wolves v Manchester United. Are Wolves going to the Championship? The new manager hasn't done very well there, of course. Going in, you would expect some would a new manager bounce. It's just not happening. Manchester United is a strange one, Gareth, because a lot of people, wrote off Manchester United, but it looks like they could, if they continue in the way that they are at the moment, they could finish in a European spot. However, there are a lot of doubters amongst the fan base of the style of football, like you mentioned a minute ago about that the West Ham United game, poor quality football. So, what way is it going to be?
Yeah, I'll start with Wolves quickly because I don't think there's much that we can say about Wolves that we haven't said 15 weeks in a row here. They're struggling badly. I hate it when I'm right sometimes, Chris, because I do like Rob Edwards, but I thought it was a bad decision going to Wolves and always got that connection with the club. Total wrong time for me. If anything, he should have waited till they went on the Championship next year and maybe brought them back up. Because I think ultimately, if he takes them down and doesn't win a game, they're not going to keep him, or they're going to change it up again. So, no, I think Wolves at this stage are going to be planning for life in the Championship. They're not going to win enough games. They might not even win a game, Chris. They don't seem to be able to compete. And I think just the lack of confidence is just oozing out of them every week. And I think the longer it goes on, the more unlikely they are to win that game. So, no, massive worrying signs for Wolves there, because you don't think at the minute they're not a team that you could go, they'll bounce back because of the financial problems they have, the amount of players they've lost. No, I think Wolves could be in for a tough period. But look, we'll see what comes of that. Man United, funny one, Chris, and you mentioned this about Liverpool, and I think you've mentioned this about Spurs in recent weeks as well, that, if we win a couple of games, it'll be okay. But is it really? Because is that not just a sign that this is a very, very poor Premier League at the moment, that, you can be as bad as these teams have been. If you won 2 in a row, you're almost back into the top 4 or 5. It doesn't make you a great side. Yes, it might look pretty on paper, but, are United getting any better under Amram? I mean, the jury's out for me. I mean, I think Gary Neville and Roy Keane are losing their patience. Everton at home was awful. 10 men, and they never really created anything. West Ham last night, huffed and puffed. A couple of chances in the first half. Got the goal with 30 minutes to go. And with 15 minutes left, instead of pushing on for a second goal, when West Ham really looked like they weren't going to be able to do anything, he takes off all his attacking players and packs them on field and lets West Ham get back on it, and they go and get a draw. So I think Ruben Amram's made some strange decisions over the last few weeks. Yes, it was a great one against Crystal Palace, but the 2 home games against Everton and West Ham are some of the strangest decisions I've ever seen. The persistence with the back 3 against Everton in the second half, when Everton had no intention of going forward, they were going to try and see out the one. He still had 3 players in the halfway line when he really didn't need them. He could have brought midfielders on. He could have changed the system to get more attack. He's stuck with the system. And then the other night, he takes off Cunha, and he took off Ahmed, and he brought on Ugarte, and he brought on Dorgu. And it just looked so wrong with all those players on the pitch. so many defensive-minded players, it almost invited West Ham. Well, we know what you're going to do. You're going to try and play out for a 1-0 here. And there was no need to do it because West Ham weren't creating anything. So he's got a lot of decisions in the last few weeks wrong. And I think United fans are losing patience. And yes, you can point to, well, if they had a won last night, they would have been in fuff. But it's such a poor Premier League at the minute, Chris, that I think it says a lot about these teams like Liverpool, Spurs, and Man United that they're struggling in such a poor league. And it's one of them might end up sneaking in there, but it wouldn't be because they're a good team. It's just because the rest of the league's so inconsistent. So I think Amram's, he'll probably get this season unless it gets really bad. But I mean, if he doesn't get them into the top 5 this season with 1 game a week, I don't think they could even give him a third season, because where would the evidence be that they'd be capable of doing it? The players' body language worries me about United. That seems to have gone stale, and it's going back to how it looked, how it ended under Ten Hag, under Solskjaer, and previous managers, where don't know how much the players fancy it. And you're playing for Man United in front of 75,000 every week. I mean, you should be absolutely itching to get onto the pitch, but United didn't look interested against West Ham or Everton. And that is a massive worry for the manager. And he keeps making these statements, doesn't he, Chris, that we're miles off where we should be and we're miles off where I want us to be. And he's saying all the right things, but some of his decisions on the pitch is very, very strange. So we'll finish on this one, Chris, because just as we're speaking about strange, I find this whole Premier League season very, very strange at the moment. I don't think there's particularly a lot of good sides in it. Anyone can beat anyone. And
I was going to say that, Gareth, because the date we're on now, the date of recording this on the Friday before these games are starting, on the 5th of December, you would think that the games in December and certainly January, this is where it's really going to shape up the Premier League table, isn't it? Because games are coming thick and fast, and it is about these teams now that can put a consistent run together, winning 3 or 4 games in the matter of a couple of weeks, and then you're going to be climbing up that Premier League table. But then again, if teams have got injury problems and other issues arise, then you could be dropping down that Premier League table, particularly how tight it is in there at the moment. Like I said at the very start, Spurs 11th at the moment, 5 points, we could be in top 4, and 5 points adrift, we could be, just above the relegation zone. So it's very, very tight in there. So it's all about consistency right now.
I think one of the reasons that these teams are struggling, if you look at Spurs, Liverpool, Man United, they all seem to have the same kind of problems of identity crisis. You don't know what the teams are actually trying to do. Like we've had 13 months of Ruben Amorim, and I still don't know what Man United are. Are they a counter-attack team? Are they a high-pressing team? Are they a team that want to get on the ball and play? Don't know, because I haven't seen anything. Spurs, Thomas Frank's in the door 5-6 months. Don't know what we're doing. Liverpool, they've bought all these great players on paper, but don't know what they are. They actually sat back against Sunderland at home. So it's almost as if these managers at the moment are just a bit confused in what they want to do. And I think it's creating these inconsistency in results. So I think if you're at Crystal Palace, if you're at Brighton at the minute, you've got to be taking advantage of these teams being so inconsistent and try and build up a points tally, a bit like how Nottingham Forest did last year when they got themselves so far ahead that they virtually guaranteed a European place. And if one of these teams can do that and sort of put 10 or 12 points between, 4th and 8th, if they're 12 points ahead of team in 8th, you think they're guaranteed to be a top 6, top 7, even if they have a dip. So big few weeks ahead coming into the new year for these teams that are struggling, because if the one thing I would say, Chris, if Spurs, Man United, Liverpool remain inconsistent, you can be sure that gap will get bigger and bigger, because I think at one point last year, January, February time, Chris, we were saying that we've got some players back. We might still be able to get into Europe, but by the end, we finished 17th. So you just end up, if you don't improve, eventually you'll just keep sliding down that table. So massive few weeks. But look, I always look forward to the Christmas fixtures, because so much football on the TV. And if you have a good Christmas on the pitch, you usually have a good Christmas at home, don't you, with your family? So let's hope Spurs can give us a nice Christmas.
Absolutely. So to end, score prediction for Wolves v Manchester United. I'm going to go for a 3-0 United win.
Do you know what? This is the type of game you don't know. United could throw this away. You just don't know what you couldn't trust Man United. I think I said it a few weeks ago, Chris. Man United remind me of almost like the new Spurs. they've got that. I think Neville and Keane says they're a very soft touch, and Roy Keane says, "I've told you before, they're the new Spurs." So this has got a United shocker all over it. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw.
I thought you were going to say a 1-0 Wolves. Well, you never know in the Premier League, do you?
I can't back Wolves. They won a game. They haven't won one yet. But you never know.
Yeah. Well, Gareth, thank you so much for joining me as always. Where can people find you and what you're up to at the moment?
Always good. They come on, Chris. They preview the weekend's games. We always say we're going to keep it short, but we always end up.
I know.
But look, loads to talk about, and if you want to give me a follow on at Gareth Hotspurs, you can work away on X. I will be back on the podcast on Tuesday night after the Slavia Prague game, so you should be able to find me on the podcast then.
Yep, brilliant. Look forward to it, and thank you as always. Have a great weekend. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for listening. Have a great weekend, and let's hope that Spurs can get a home win at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium against Brentford. Thanks for all your incredible support as always, and until the next one, come on you Spurs.